We are at Appomattox, like the town of Appomattox, and behind there is the courthouse. And over there, that red brick building is the McLean House, where the surrender by General Lee was actually signed. So this house behind me is the McLean House, and it wasn't called that at the time of the surrender. It was later owned by a fairly wealthy businessman named McLean, for whom the house is named after. But it was in this house, on the day of the surrender, General Lee arrived first, waited in the parlor for about 2 hours. Then General Grant and his staff arrived. They met in the room where the surrender was signed to discuss the terms. Lee asked Grant to write out terms of surrender. Grant wrote them out. Lee added a couple of things, made a couple of changes, and then finally signed the document, and he and his staff rode away. Inside the room in the McLean House where the surrender was signed, and you can see Grant's table there behind me, and then the table Lee sat at with the marble top is right there. These aren't the actual tables. Lee's table is in Chicago, and Grant's table is in the Smithsonian, but in this room you definitely get a sense of the magnitude of events that occurred in here. And along with Grant and Lee, there was probably a couple of dozen of other officers standing around this relatively very small room. Once the surrender was signed by the generals, there was a lot of things to work out and how exactly to execute the terms of the surrender. So a 6-person commission was formed with the members from both the North and the South armies, the Confederate and the United States armies, and to work out the terms of the surrender and how they would lay down their arms, how the Confederate troops would be allowed to return to their homes. And one of the interesting things in this building, this is the Tavern building, are these papers on these drawing lines behind me. These were parole passes that were printed up very quickly in this building after the surrender was signed and given to the Confederate troops so they could pass unmolested through any sort of Union forces or lines or anywhere else they needed to go to get home and not be arrested or put into prison or something like that. On the ridge directly behind me is where Brigadier General Joshua Chamberlain had his unit in formation. And as the Confederates marched in front of him down this road into Appomattox so they could stack their arms right along this road, stack all their ammunition, take everything, any implement of war was to be left here. They could retain their personal horses and any personal effects they had, and they would pick up their parole papers, which allowed them to travel unmolested on any free government transport back to their homes. And at this point, they would walk into Appomattox and exit out the other side. One of the surprising things for me about this site was the fact that Appomattox was not just a courthouse or a place of surrender, which is what I thought it was. It was a thriving, small-sized village. There were over 100 people who lived here, and it included, of course, the courthouse, several residences of people who lived here, including their slave quarters, a tavern, a blacksmith, a boarding house, a jail, and even a site to auction slaves. Walking around this site makes it very clear that we are not in the mountains anymore. It is hot out here.